The problem with me is I care too much. Now that sounds like a false modesty, right? It's like saying the trouble with me is I'm a bit of a perfectionist. We don't really see it as a problem, we see it as a strength. But is it? In my experience, caring too much, just like perfectionism, isn't very helpful. See, I found that often when I really care about something, I can all too easily get in my own way and actually limit the amount of good I can do. Now, before I get into the perils of caring too much, there are 3 things I'd like to share about myself today. Number 1, I'm a do-gooder. 13 years ago, my best mate Jimmy and I set up a charity in our spare time called Pass It On Africa. And our goal was simple, we wanted to help build schools in Africa. And since 2005, we've been involved in 6 school build projects in Kenya, in Ghana, in the Gambia, and in Uganda. And whilst it hasn't always been plain sailing, I'm really proud to say that all these schools are still running today, completely independent of us. Okay, number 2, I'm scared shitless. Now obviously I'm scared shitless right now, but I'm talking more in general. I've struggled with mental health and particularly anxiety for most of my life. And this isn't particularly enjoyable to talk about because, like a lot of people, I've always masked my feelings, but you all seem like a nice bunch, and in the spirit of do different, I shall. Okay, more about chronic worrying shortly, but first, number 3, I'm an artist. This is me early on in my career. Don't be fooled, I was a little bugger really. I've been drawing for as long as I can remember really, and I think art has always been a way for me to make sense of my feelings and make sense of the world. My work has clearly been influenced by the time I've spent in Africa, but above all, I think it's the human condition that really drives my ideas, why we are the way we are. What we all share is human universals, the beliefs we hold and why we hold them, and the masks we wear and why we wear them. So why have I told you these 3 things about myself? Well, it's because I think they all contribute to the way that I care. For example, I think it's growing up worrying all the time that made me a do-gooder in the first place. I remember in the 80s when the Ethiopian famine was all over the news, and it really bothered me. I couldn't get it out of my head. I worried about it for weeks. I felt really anxious, and I had this huge sense of responsibility, and I was about 7 or 8. And I think people around me, just to make me feel better, told me I was a really caring person, and I liked that. It made me feel better when I was worrying. So even at a young age, I think my over-caring, anxious identity was beginning to take shape. Now, has anyone here ever felt like they've cared too much? Maybe about something or someone? Maybe it's in a relationship, and you become fearful of losing that person. I wonder what that looks like as a set of behaviours. Holding on too tight? Pushing them away? It can be exhausting, right? Unproductive? Or maybe just unsustainable? So is it really possible to care too much? I guess what I'm saying is careful how you care. Now, I'm no expert in psychology or philosophy, but I am an expert in my own experiences. I also happen to be married to a therapist. Lucky me. She's one of the smartest people I know, and she's really taught me a lot about compassion and why it's really no wonder that we all struggle from time to time. So what does it mean to care? Well, I've learned it's made up of feelings, thoughts, and actions. And I guess what we hope is that these actions will lead us to do some good or make some positive change. I remember the first time I went to Africa and witnessed true poverty, and I was whacked with feelings of sadness and anger and guilt. And this led to thoughts like, what a dick I am to worry so much. Something's got to change. I've got to do something. The world is so unfair. And this led to actions like setting up a charity. Okay, so some were good, but at times I've also been guilty of getting on my high horse when talking about charity. And my artwork has struggled for a while too, becoming stifled by my own black and white, right and wrong views. But most importantly, at times it's led me to overwork and undervalue my own interests, becoming stifled by anxiety and fear. You see, with caring, it's really hard to manage our thoughts and feelings. and therefore all too easy to act in ways which are paradoxically uncaring, even if we don't mean them to be. So how have I come to think like this? Well, let's start with the charity. Now, Parts on Africa began pretty innocuously, really. A friend of ours who works in international development told us about this school in Nairobi that needed some help. You see, all the kids there kept getting infections through their feet just because they didn't have any shoes. And we thought, A, this is terrible, and B, it may be kind of cool if we could run a marathon and try and raise enough money to buy all the kids a pair of shoes. So that's what we did, and we loved it. And then later on that year, we actually visited the Tenderfoot School in Nairobi, and we were blown away by how well the school was run and what they were doing there. Their infrastructure was great, but they were hopelessly oversubscribed, and what they really needed was some more classrooms. So we came back to England all fired up and started thinking of some fundraising ideas. Some of these were definitely more productive than others. This is one of our early escapades. We carried a rowing machine to the top of the 3 highest mountains in Britain, and then we rode the height of each mountain at the top, dressed as superheroes designed by 6-year-olds. Like to meet Bathman and Julio, Super Julio. Now, believe it or not, that was actually really enjoyable, and we did raise quite a bit of money, but we quickly realised that if the charity was going to continue, we needed to get more people involved. And that's where the Heroes Run comes in, a superhero-themed fancy dress fun run along Brighton seafront. It kind of looks like this. And this. And this is us actually setting the world record for the most superheroes in one place. It was literally beaten a week later by someone in America, but we don't talk about that. I've also got their certificate. They sent it to me by mistake, so... They have the moral victory, but I have the piece of paper. And we also have a kids race, which looks like this, or at least it does today. Because just like the charity, Heroes Run didn't happen overnight. In 2005, the race looked a lot more like this. Volunteers outnumbering runners 4-1. Because we had no idea what we were doing. We were in our early 20s and we had no experience in marketing or event management. And so as a result, with about 20 minutes to go, we had about 20 runners. Now that looks pretty miserable. It was raining, we kind of just wanted to go home. We felt pretty embarrassed. And then with 10 minutes to go, the sun came out, and with it, I kid you not, on the horizon came a whole army of superheroes, led by Banana Man, marching towards us. So we literally had about 3 pens and 50 entry forms, and we didn't have any float to take any money, so it was a bit of a shambles, but against the odds, the first race ended up being a real success. And I distinctly remember at the end of the race, a very sweaty Spider-Man coming up to me and putting his arm around my shoulder and saying, "See you next year." There was clearly an appetite for this event to continue, and we felt compelled to carry it on. And so we did, and we carried on raising quite a bit of money, and the charity grew and grew, so much so that a couple of years later, we could actually fund the new classrooms at Tenderfoot. This is one of the 6 classrooms being built in 2007. This is how they look today. And we were also able to fund the working kitchen at the school, and we even purchased the neighbouring land so that it could be used for playing fields. So this was great. The charity was working, and it quickly became part of my identity. It was a perfect antidote to those feelings of not being good enough. And I think we became victims of our own success in many ways. My wife, Edwina, and friends Mark and Nikki had now become part of the team, but the amount of work required by me had grown exponentially. You see, I was still trying to be an artist during the day, which is not very easy, and I was slowly squeezing in more and more charity work at night. And I think rather than recognise that this is what I was doing, I simply normalised the amount of work I was doing. So I became a little bit resentful and frustrated at times. And this definitely spilt out into the way that I was communicating with our fundraisers. You see, I just couldn't believe that they weren't raising more money than they were. And I got really frustrated that they didn't care about this as much as I did. Now, despite my grumpy frustrations, we remained productive. This is the Dreamland school that we funded in Ghana in 2012. I just spoke to the founder of the school last week, actually, and they've just had their 1,000th pupil finish their primary education there. This is one of the classrooms at Dreamlands. And this is the Fresh Start Skills Centre that we funded in 2014 in the Gambia with another great charity called the Fresh Start Foundation. So, yeah, we were productive. But the stress of running a charity is really beginning to mount, and I was literally developing a superhero complex. believing for no good reason that I should be working longer and harder than anyone else. And this was starting to affect my artwork message too. You see, I felt like I had something to say, but most importantly, I had the moral high ground to shout it from. These two are from a series of portraits I created of some of the kids from our schools directly onto celebrity magazine covers. And I really wanted to highlight just how ridiculous I thought all our interests were, particularly when compared to their relative suffering. I was very righteous. The frivolous West is evil, amen, I win. Except I wasn't winning, because guess what? People don't really want artwork that makes them feel terrible. Go figure. And in a similar vein, there's only so many hard-hitting charity messages we can all hear before we become shut down to them. So in short, I became completely run down and more anxious than ever. So something had to change. I took some time out and started seeing some interesting parallels between myself, my artwork, and the charity. I wasn't blessed with amazing insights of introspection, by the way. I had some very helpful therapy at the time. And I realised that I cared a lot, but the way I was going about things was unproductive, and this was definitely unsustainable. And one of the main reasons for that was my standards were just too damn high. Both the standards I was putting on myself, but also the standards I was demanding of everyone else. And this really hit home for me when one evening I was watching TV and a couple of charity adverts came on back to back, and I cared, but I didn't take any action. Yet there I was getting really annoyed with all our fundraisers for not raising enough money. I was a bit of a hypocrite. So I became curious about what mechanisms in me led to giving, but also what shut me down to it. You see, I'd met all the kids in our schools, and I'd seen where they lived, and I just didn't have that same connection with these adverts I was seeing on TV. And that's just kind of obvious, right? It's just human nature. You see, we've evolved in these really small communities where we respond a lot more positively to intimate one-to-one interactions. Now, this is described a lot more eloquently by Peter Singer in a lot of his writing, but particularly for me, the book The Life You Can Save, which I can't recommend highly enough. And he actually outlines some of these barriers to giving that we all experience. Now, I won't go into that too much here, but suffice to say that I didn't know everything, and I didn't care the most. But most importantly, that was kind of all right. I could maybe just give myself a bit of a break. And so from there, our fundraising communications became a lot more open and less shaming. And I stopped thinking that everything rested on me, at least for a while. And quite frankly, I became a little less preachy. And this new spirit of curiosity was having a positive impact on my artwork too. You see, I realised that my art could be inspired by the charity, but it didn't have to be a campaign for the charity. And that was a big realisation for me, because as an artist, it's so much more enjoyable to observe the world and your place in it, rather than be pointing your finger at it all the time. And I think you can see this in some of my later work, clearly influenced by the charity and Heroes Run. But I think these pieces speak a lot more to those feelings I was saying from my childhood of feeling like I had to mask my feelings and create these alter egos in order to feel safe. And because I was being more open in my artwork, people were starting to respond to it a lot more positively, which was great, because I started getting a bit more success and I could pay some damn bills. And so just for a while, I sort of carried on a bit more of an even keel. Now, things changed again in 2017 when we realised that the Heroes Run was no longer sustainable. We'd had a fantastic run with it, but the reality was that the expenses were going up, the fundraising was going down, but most importantly, the amount of time I had to do anything about it was less than ever. Our team had shrunk too, because inevitably people's professional lives had taken over. We began this in our early 20s when we all had lots of spare time. So now it was just my wife and I running the charity, and soberly and objectively, we thought maybe we've taken this as far as we can. And so it was time to shut the charity down. But I wasn't letting go. You see, I felt really vulnerable about the mask of the charity. What if I'm not good enough about it? Remember that unhelpful relationship I spoke about? Caring too much. I was still hanging on. So I became really hard on myself again. I started saying things like, you just need to work harder, you can make this work, you just got to put more effort in. And I became really anxious again. But what had I learned about masks and compassion? Maybe it was about the right time to show myself a bit of compassion. And I was finally able to see the true value in what we'd created and pass it on. So in 2017, we gave the Heroes Run to another great charity called Rise UK, a charity with a brilliant fundraising infrastructure that can really capitalise on the potential of the race. Now, I'm still helping them with all the artwork and design and the event setup, because that's quite easy for me. I've done it for 13 years. And in return, I'm choosing 5 African aid charities to have free places in the race. The simple equation is that for about 10% of my effort, probably a 5-fold increase in fundraising can take place. You see, I'm not spending hundreds of hours trying to run a charity in my spare time. I'm spending that time being an artist instead. And because I'm getting more success as an artist, I can now use my artwork to support other charities. Charities that are run a lot more effectively and efficiently than the one I was working so hard to try and keep going. My do-gooding can reach a lot further now that I've taken off my mask. Now, what I don't want to leave you with today is the thought that anything I think that I've done that's been good has just been to alleviate my anxiety, because I think that I'd be doing myself a disservice. But what I do want to leave you with today is one simple idea. Now, you've probably heard me say these phrases a couple of times already today, productivity and sustainability, and there's nothing new here. We often think of these in terms of business, where the red area can work for profit or long-term success. But what I invite you to do today is think of these terms in the context of the way that we care, being mindful of our thoughts and feelings, which are really complicated, and embrace the caring sweet spot. We all care. We care a lot. Caring's important. Let's take it seriously. What I've described today has been my meandering, fumbling journey towards becoming more careful how I care. Now, when I care about something, and all those thoughts and feelings are rushing around in my head, before I act, I don't always succeed, but I try to ask myself just a couple of questions first. Is what I'm about to do going to be productive? Is it going to be sustainable? Am I going to hit the caring sweet spot? And if I can answer yes to those questions, I can be fairly confident that my do-gooding can be its goodest. And hopefully this can help you guys too. Thanks for listening.